Sibling Betrayal, when family becomes the ultimate thief. My name is Ethan, and if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's that family can be the worst thieves. I used to think betrayal was something that happened in movies, dramatic and far-fetched. But nope, it happens in real life too, sometimes by the very people you're supposed to trust. And in my case, it was my older brother, Caleb. Caleb has always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. If he wanted something, he took it. If he messed up, someone else paid the price. Growing up, I got used to him borrowing my things and never giving them back. Video games, clothes, money from my wallet. And when I complained, I was being selfish. He's your older brother, Ethan. He looks out for you, Mom would say, as if taking my stuff was some act of love. Dad wasn't any better. If Caleb messed up, I was the scapegoat. If Caleb needed help, I was expected to step up. That was just the way things were. I should have known he'd eventually do something worse. I should have been more careful. See, for the past 5 years, I've been saving up for my first house. Every spare dollar went into that fund. I picked up extra shifts, skipped vacations, and lived frugally. It wasn't just about owning property. It was about freedom, independence, no more being dragged into Caleb's messes, no more being guilt-tripped by our parents. My escape was so close I could taste it. Then, one morning, I checked my account and my stomach dropped. The money was gone, all of it. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I refreshed the page, checked my transaction history, and that's when I saw it. A huge withdrawal, transferred to an account I didn't recognize. Panic turned to confusion. Then, as I clicked through my settings, realization dawned on me like a slow, sickening punch to the gut. Caleb. He knew about my savings, and more importantly, he knew about the shared account I'd stupidly kept open from years ago, back when our parents insisted we have one for emergencies. I rarely touched it, but Caleb, he must have noticed, and somehow he still had access. I called him immediately. No answer. I texted. Nothing. My hands were shaking. I drove straight to his place, heart pounding in my chest. The moment he opened the door, I could already tell. That smug, self-satisfied smirk. "Ah, Ethan, I was wondering when you'd show up," he said, leaning lazily against the doorframe. "What the hell did you do?" My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. Caleb shrugged. "Relax, I just borrowed it." "Borrowed?" I could barely breathe. "That was my house fund, Caleb. Where is it?" And then, like the absolute bastard he was, he grinned and pulled out his phone. A few swipes. And suddenly I was staring at a picture, a sleek, brand-new sports car gleaming under the dealership lights. My heart sank. "You don't need a house yet," he said, laughing. "Just be patient." I swear something inside me snapped right then and there. But instead of yelling, instead of lunging at him like I so desperately wanted to, I went quiet. I turned around and walked away, because I knew if I stayed, I'd do something I couldn't take back. Caleb thought he won. He thought I'd just roll over like I always had. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. This time, I was going to make him regret everything. For the next few days, I was in a haze. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that smug look on Caleb's face, that damn picture of his new car. My money, years of saving, grinding, sacrificing, all wiped away in an instant because my brother decided he was entitled to it. And the worst part? My parents. I called them thinking, stupidly, that maybe, just maybe, they'd finally see Caleb for what he was, that they'd finally take my side. I should have known better. Mom sighed like I was overreacting. "Ethan, it's just money. You can always save up again." "Mom, it wasn't just money, it was everything I had." "You're young," she said, as if that somehow made it better. "You have plenty of time to buy a house. Your brother, he's been struggling lately. You know, he really needed a win." I nearly dropped my phone. A win? He stole from me. He took my money and blew it on a car. There was a long pause. "He said he'd pay you back." I let out a bitter laugh. "And you actually believe that?" Dad finally chimed in, his voice tired. "Ethan, we're a family. Families help each other. Maybe this is a lesson for you to be less materialistic." That was it. That was when I realized I was alone in this. My parents weren't going to help. Caleb wasn't going to magically grow a conscience. If I wanted my money back, I had to take matters into my own hands. And so I did what Caleb never expected. I went quiet. I stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped showing up at family dinners. When Mom asked why I wasn't coming over, I just said I was busy. I knew she'd relay that back to Caleb, and I knew he'd assume I was sulking, pouting, that I was just going to get over it like I always had. He had no idea I was planning my revenge. I spent the next week digging, and oh, did I find things. Caleb wasn't just careless. He was reckless. That brand new sports car, he didn't just buy it. He financed it under his name, and Caleb, being Caleb, had terrible credit. That meant sky-high monthly payments. Payments he could barely afford. Then there was his job, or rather, the lack of job security. Caleb worked in sales, a commission-based gig that was feast or famine. He was already behind on rent. I found eviction notices crumpled up in his trash when I dropped by unexpectedly one day. His landlord hated him, and from the looks of it, he was hanging by a thread. And the final nail in the coffin? Insurance fraud. Caleb had told the dealership he'd be using the car for personal use only, which got him a lower rate. But I knew for a fact he was using it for side gigs, sometimes as a private chauffeur for quick cash, sometimes for ride-sharing. All it took was one anonymous tip to his insurance company, and they'd come down on him hard. I had all the pieces now. I just had to set them in motion. I started small. First, I made sure his landlord got a little reminder about those late payments. A friendly nudge, just in case they'd forgotten. Then, I placed a call to his insurance provider, acting like a concerned citizen who just happened to notice his car being used for commercial purposes. They assured me they'd look into it. And finally, I waited until Caleb was at work before making my move. I walked into the dealership, calm and collected. The salesman who sold him the car was there, a slick-looking guy in a suit. I put on my best polite but frustrated customer face. "Hey, I'm trying to track down some information about a car my brother recently purchased," I said. "There's been a bit of a situation." The guy perked up immediately, all professional charm. "Of course. What seems to be the issue?" I sighed, feigning exasperation. "Well, he told me he paid for it in full, but I found out he actually financed it under his name. Problem is, he used some of my financial information when applying. I'm worried there's been some, let's call it creative paperwork involved." The salesman's expression faltered just a little. That was all I needed. "Now, I'd hate to have to escalate this legally," I continued, lowering my voice. "But I just need to confirm whether my name appears anywhere on that paperwork. If it does, well, I'd have no choice but to report it as fraud. I'm sure you understand." I saw the exact moment the guy started panicking. "Let me just check the system real quick." I waited, watching as he scrolled through Caleb's file. I knew my name wasn't there. Caleb hadn't been dumb enough to put me down directly. But I also knew something else. Car dealerships hate fraud cases. Even the slightest whiff of it can get a deal reversed. The salesman cleared his throat. "Oh, well, I can assure you, sir, that everything was processed according to policy. However, if there's any concern about fraudulent activity, I'd recommend contacting the finance department directly." Bingo. That's all I needed to hear. I nodded, thanked him, and walked out. Straight to my car, where I drafted an official-sounding email to the dealership's finance office, CCNG their fraud department. I kept it vague, just enough to raise alarms. Within an hour, I got a response. "Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We take fraudulent applications very seriously and will be reviewing this matter immediately." I smiled. The wheels were in motion now. Caleb had no idea what was coming. And the best part? I wasn't even close to done yet. 2 days later, Caleb called me. I let it ring. Then again and again. He never called me this much unless he wanted something. Finally, I answered, keeping my voice casual. "Hey, Caleb, what's up?" His voice was tight, on edge. "Did you do something?" I raised an eyebrow, even though he couldn't see me. "Do something about what?" "Don't play dumb, Ethan," he snapped. "The dealership just called. They said there's an issue with my financing. And now they're talking about possibly reassessing my loan. And guess what? My insurance just emailed me saying my policy is under review." I almost laughed. That was faster than I expected. "Wow, that sounds serious," I said. "But I'm not sure what that has to do with me." "Liar," Caleb practically shouted. "You've been quiet for a week, and now suddenly everything's going wrong? I know you had something to do with this." "Caleb, you stole from me. I said, my voice steady. You stole the money I spent years saving up, and instead of apologizing, you rubbed it in my face. You told me to be patient while you drove around in a car you couldn't afford. And now you're mad because karma is finally catching up to you. Oh, don't give me that self-righteous crap. He scoffed. You're just being a bitter little brat. Whatever you did, undo it now. I let out a slow breath, pretending to think. No, I don't think I will. Caleb, bye. I hung up. The next day, things got worse for him. I knew because I got another call, this time from my mother. Ethan, what did you do? She demanded the second I picked up. Hello to you too, Mom. I said dryly. Don't be sarcastic. Your brother is in trouble. The dealership is threatening to take his car back, and now his landlord is on his case about rent. He said you did something to ruin his credit. I sighed. I didn't ruin his credit, Mom. Caleb ruined his credit all on his own by being financially reckless. And maybe if you actually held him accountable for once in his life, he wouldn't be in this mess. You're his brother. You're supposed to help him, not sabotage him. I laughed bitterly. Oh, so when he steals thousands of dollars from me, I'm supposed to just let it go. But when I do something that makes him face the consequences of his actions, suddenly I'm a bad guy. You don't understand, she huffed. He's under a lot of stress right now. And I'm not. I shot back. Do you even care that I lost my entire house fund? Or is Caleb's sports car more important than my future? There was a pause. Ethan, just fix this, please. No. I hung up. Now, I knew Caleb. I knew he wasn't going to take this lying down. And sure enough, he tried to retaliate. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. You think you're smart? Huh? Watch your back. Real mature. But I wasn't worried. Caleb was all bark, no bite. He'd never been able to handle things on his own. He always had someone, usually my parents, cleaning up his messes. But now, there was no one to save him. The next morning, I decided to check in on my handiwork. I made a call to the finance office at the dealership, playing the concerned victim of potential fraud again. The woman on the other end was polite but firm. We've identified some inconsistencies in the application, she told me. At this time, the loan is being reassessed and pending further investigation. The vehicle may be repossessed if payments cannot be verified. Repossessed. That meant Caleb had only a short window before they took his precious car away. But that wasn't all. My little tip to his insurance company had worked. Since he had lied about how he was using the car, his policy was under review, and from what I gathered, there was a high chance they'd either cancel it entirely or jack up his rates, so high he couldn't afford them. And then, of course, there was his landlord. I made sure they got every single piece of documentation about his late payments. If Caleb missed one more, eviction was on the table. Caleb was about to lose everything. And yet, I still wasn't done, because there was one last thing, something that would ensure he had no way out. I took a deep breath, pulled up my email, and drafted one final message. It was time to seal his fate. A few days passed, and I heard nothing from Caleb. No calls, no texts. Even my parents went unusually quiet. That meant one thing. He was scrambling, trying to fix the mess he'd made. But I also knew something else. Caleb wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. He was either scheming or hoping our parents would step in and fix everything for him. Then, one evening, just as I was getting ready to turn in for the night, there was a loud, rapid knocking at my door. Not a normal knock, more like someone trying to break it down. I already knew who it was. With a sigh, I walked over and pulled the door open. There he stood, Caleb, looking absolutely furious. His normally well-groomed hair was disheveled. His expensive jacket slightly wrinkled, and his expression was a mix of rage and panic. His eyes were practically bulging out of his skull. You ruined my life, he exploded, shoving his way inside before I could stop him. I let out a slow breath, closing the door behind him. And hello to you too, Caleb. Don't start with me, Ethan, he growled. You know exactly what you did. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. You mean making sure you face the consequences of your own actions? Yeah, I know what I did. And you deserved every bit of it. They're taking my car, he shouted, pacing like a caged animal. The dealership called today and said my loan was under review. And guess what? Turns out lying on an application is a big deal. Who knew? He let out a bitter laugh before whirling on me. Oh, and my insurance canceled just like that. They said I committed fraud or whatever. And my landlord? They're threatening eviction because apparently they don't like tenants who habitually fail to meet payment deadlines. I wonder who sent them that info. I didn't answer. He already knew. You had no right, he continued, stepping closer, his voice shaking with fury. None of this had anything to do with you. I scoffed. Oh, really? Because last I checked, you stole thousands of dollars from me. That money was supposed to be for my house, Caleb, my future, and you took it like it was nothing just so you could show off in some flashy car. And the worst part? You weren't even sorry. You laughed in my face. I was going to pay you back, he snapped. Why, I shot back, be specific. He opened his mouth, then shut it. We both knew the truth. He was never going to pay me back, not unless he absolutely had to. He exhaled sharply, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. Fine, you got your little revenge. You made your point. Now fix it. I stared at him, my expression unreadable. Fix what? Call the dealership. Tell them it was a mistake. Call the insurance company. Say you lied. Call my landlord, and his nostrils flared. Ethan, I swear. You swear what? I cut him off, my voice dangerously calm. What are you going to do, Caleb? Steal from me again? You've already taken everything I worked for, and now that things aren't going your way, you want me to clean up your mess? Not happening. Caleb let out a frustrated noise and threw himself onto my couch. Rubbing his temples like this was somehow also stressful for him. I can't believe this, he muttered. I was supposed to be set. Everything was perfect. And now I have nothing. You know what's crazy? I said, my voice eerily light. You still could have had everything. You could have just asked me for a loan. We could have worked something out. But instead, you decided to be greedy, and now you're broke. He didn't respond. A moment of silence stretched between us. Then, finally, he exhaled through his nose and sat up, looking at me with something new in his expression, something calculating. Okay, he said slowly. How much? I blinked. What? How much do you want? He asked, his tone forcedly casual. To undo all of this? Name your price. I laughed. I actually laughed. You seriously think you can buy your way out of this? Everything has a price. He shot back. I shook my head. Not this time. His jaw clenched. He was losing control of the situation, and he knew it. Then, as if on cue, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it. An email from my bank. The subject line, incoming wire transfer received. I clicked it open, and there it was, the full amount of my stolen money, every last cent back in my account. I stared at it for a long moment before turning the screen toward him. What's this? Caleb didn't meet my eyes. I had to borrow it, he mumbled. Took out a loan. Just undo everything now. I smiled, slipping my phone back into my pocket. No. His head snapped up. What? I got your money back, but that doesn't mean I'm letting you off the hook. You're still going to lose everything. Caleb, and maybe, just maybe, when you hit rock bottom, you'll finally understand what it feels like. Caleb shot up from the couch, his face red with rage. You smug little... I held up a hand. Leave, Caleb. We're done here. He stood there, breathing heavily, his hands twitching like he wanted to punch something, but he didn't because he knew this time there was nothing he could do. Finally, he turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door so hard that the walls shook. I let out a slow breath, sinking onto my couch. I had my money back. Caleb was about to lose everything, and for the first time in a long time, I felt peaceful. But that peace didn't last long, because as I had predicted, Caleb wasn't done. At first, it was little things. He'd call from different numbers, leaving angry voicemails about how I'd ruined his life and how I didn't understand what I'd done. I blocked each time. Then my parents started calling, demanding to know why Caleb was in such a mess. You took it too far, Ethan, my mom scolded over the phone. He's your brother. You should be helping him, not tearing him down. I laughed bitterly. Helping him like how he helped himself to my savings. That was different, she huffed. He made a mistake. You didn't have to go and destroy his life over it. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, I didn't destroy his life. He did. I just made sure he couldn't get away with it. Well, your father, and I think you should fix it. If you really cared about family, you'd talk to the bank, the dealership, do something to help him. I shook my head. No, I've already done more than enough. If Caleb wants to fix his life, he can do it himself. She sputtered, but I ended the call before she could guilt-trip me further. They would never see things my way. I had finally accepted that. But Caleb, he wasn't done yet. A few nights later, I woke up to a loud bang outside my apartment. My stomach dropped as I rushed to my window, and sure enough, there was Caleb standing next to my car. He had a baseball bat in his hands, his whole body tensed with rage. Before he could take another swing, I grabbed my phone and called the cops. By the time they arrived, he had shattered both my side mirrors and left a deep dent in the driver's door. But the real kicker? When the officers asked him why he did it, he went on a whole rant about how I ruined his life and that this was payback. They didn't like that answer. Caleb was arrested for vandalism and property damage. My insurance covered the repairs, and with the police report, I wasn't on the hook for a dime. But Caleb, he now had legal fees to deal with on top of everything else. And this time, there was no one to bail him out. My parents begged me to drop the charges, but I refused. Caleb needed to learn that actions had consequences. And when the court date finally came, he looked more defeated than I had ever seen him. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by something much more modest. The arrogance was gone too. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I simply said, I just want my brother to finally take responsibility for his actions. That was the last time I saw Caleb in person. For what I heard, he had to sell what little he had left to cover his legal costs. The car was gone, his fancy lifestyle gone. He moved back in with my parents, who were now also struggling with money since they had been helping him. He tried getting a job, but with his track record, it wasn't easy. And eventually, the calls stopped. I guess he finally realized I wasn't going to save him. As for me, I put my money back into my savings, and a few months later, I finally bought my first home, the one I had been dreaming about before Caleb stole from me. And let me tell you, walking through that front door, knowing I had earned it, knowing no one could take it from me, it felt better than any revenge ever could. So what do you think? Was I too harsh? Should I have forgiven him? Or did he finally get what he deserved? Let me know.